Welcome to Performance Talk with your host, Yul Gordon and Chris Costa, where professionals discuss the latest news and developments in the profession and all areas that affect sports performance, strength and conditioning, nutrition, recovery, performance, and much more. Listen now to your host and this week's guest, next on Performance Talk.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Performance Talk. My name's Yul Gordon. Today, I'm looking forward to this conversation with Dr. Joe Brown. Dr. Brown, how are you doing today? And
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing here. It's Sunday morning here in Australia, and it's a beautiful day to have a performance talk.
Yes, indeed. I always get, whenever we do the international episodes, I'm always... it takes me a second to get caught up with the time. just where everybody is and what time it is and those kind of things. But tell the audience, our listeners, a little bit about yourself, and let's start with how you got started in performance.
Basically started off in strength and conditioning, but wanted to be a physiotherapist, physical therapist you guys have in the US.
Right.
But always wanted to be in sport, was an athlete myself, and literally started, working as a physio, and physios generally come from that point of injury, right? So someone goes to see a physical therapist or a physio when they're injured, but I've always been about performance. So I started questioning, what is performance? I don't want to just make people better from injury. I want them to be the best athlete ever. And how do I be that person? How do I be the person that people come to, not just to get better, but to be the best? And then went down a pretty long pathway of lots of education, lots of degrees. I've gone and, got 5 different degrees and a couple of almost finished degrees that I haven't quite got there yet. In order to be able to have.
I know that feeling too. Yeah, it's amazing how you come from an athlete and maybe an injury background, maybe just being around those who were injured, and then kind of putting those two things together. Because one of the things I've learned over, I hate to even say this because it ages me a little bit, but over 35 plus years, one of the things that I learned is that on the continuum of injury, rebound, and performance, there's this big ball of stuff that's right in the middle, and it's all related, and
100%.
it's one of those things where, okay, well, I can do that on the track or on the field or on the court, but I've done this in physical therapy. Talk to our listeners about the difference between going, getting in that mushy area and then crossing over from return to play, return to activity, return to performance, and then back to performance training.
Okay, so I have a couple of things I want to say on that. One, more than a couple, but let's just start with a couple of things.
Say all of them. That's okay.
So the first thing is, I've been doing this, not as much as you, but 25 plus years as well. And what I've noticed is, and consistently across sports, I work with 19 sports at international level. It's the same, is the things, if you really get to the root of what's causing an injury, trauma happens, but you can protect yourself from trauma. So the things that really protect you from injury or cause injury are the same things that are limiting your performance, 100% across the line. So if you're a basketball player and you're struggling getting high on your jumps, that thing that's causing you not to be able to jump properly is the same thing that's making you vulnerable to injury. So when we can really get down to the nitty-gritty of that and have the skills and the knowledge to be able to look at biomechanics, look at range of motion, look at muscle activation patterns, look at, force production patterns, look at all those things and really and then how the athlete thinks and learns, pull that all together and be able to transition what you talked about, which is that what I call the clinical performance continuum. And I'm going to keep ranting on that if that's okay. So I believe I believe this is for the same for across all sports, and in my experience, it is the same. So every athlete, professional or not, should always be somewhere on the clinical performance continuum. So on one end is the clinical side, which is our, 100% physiotherapy, doctors, all those kind of things. When someone gets injured, they get thrown into that clinical side, right?
Right.
And then on the other end of the spectrum is performance, being your best version of yourself as an athlete.
Right.
In order for someone to stay on that continuum at all times, they must have 2 points of contact. So the 2 points of contact is even when you're well, even so you're a basketballer, no issues, you're 100% well, you're still going to go and get some kind of therapy, massage, red light therapy, whatever it is to help recovery, help you feel good, right? So you're still going to have some kind of clinical recovery input. So that's one point of contact. And then the other point of contact is everything you do to help your performance. So at any point, even when you're healthy, you're still having that other input. Unfortunately, what happens, and this is where I try to come in many cases I've seen globally, so whether it be in football in Europe or basketball in the US or track and field, whatever it is, people say sprain their ankle, and everyone goes, oh my God, we've got to focus on that clinical issue, right? So they're like, what is happening with the ligament? What do we do to help that ligament healing, all those kind of things, and drop the ball on the performance side. So they literally,
Right.
and I've seen this happen, right? And the NBA, all those kind of things, someone sprains their ankle and they literally don't even get to go to training. They don't even, like, they might be on a bike, but they're in another room. They're not even with the rest of the team. So all of a sudden, that
Right.
second point of contact on that clinical performance continuum is lost because there's only one point of contact, which is the clinical contact. And so but if we can maintain those 2 points of contact at all times, whether you're injured or not, you can traverse that clinical performance continuum. It's like a train going back and forth. But if you lose those 2 points of contact, your train derails. And the thing that I find is once you lose those 2 points of contact, the time to return to play is so much greater. So, you might go from 2 weeks to 6 weeks in order to gain that.
So I find that to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, um, somewhere in that recovery period. You know what I mean? I've dealt with a lot of athletes, and sort of like you're saying, across the board, there are many who don't really take recovery serious when they're not injured, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So they, yeah, I don't need a massage today. I don't need this today. I don't need that. But they don't realize all of those micro occurrences that are building up. And then when you don't take the time to recover, they become an acute occurrence that now sends you all the way back to the clinical side, as you say, on that continuum.
100%.
So
100%. And I think there's a huge education component here. And I think we've spent so much of the last kind of 10 to 15 years in the science is now coming to back up that recovery, and sports science is guiding us so much better in terms of understanding what recovery is and when is someone ready to perform at their best. We have so many markers and guides now, like HRV's been used so much more. There's so many different measures we can use in order to know whether athletes actually ready to perform or ready to push their body again. But this is not just when you're injured. This is consistently in order to perform at your best. And obviously load management and all those kind of things come into it, right?
So you said the word that I use a lot is consistency, but I also use persistency. Don't
Mm-hmm.
don't let something that's not really an acute thing. It may be just something you felt. You can't let that derail you. But I think that gets better with athletes as their training age goes up. Not their training IQ, but their training age. The longer they train, the more they understand physically what they need to do to recover. But training IQ is a whole nother thing. That's where that education piece comes in. And anytime I'm transitioning an athlete from high school to college or college to the international, professional, national team level, I talk about training IQ. Their training age is usually pretty high by that time. They've trained a lot. They've been with a lot of trainers. They know all the movements and all the exercises, and they know how to do them. But their training IQ is sometimes so you have to start teaching them the whys
Yeah.
and the
And the intent.
the
The intent.
and the intent and all those things. And why am I doing this minuscule movement over and over and over? How is that going to help me? So and sometimes athletes just they don't get it and they don't want to get it. And you have to break into that somehow so that they become persistent, but more importantly, consistent at doing all the right things.
100%.
Does that
And
make any
I think
sense?
100%. I think you touched on so many important points there. And I think, the consistency, but understanding the importance of consistency. Like I talk about high performance being a way of life, right? It's like every day. High performance just doesn't happen on Tuesdays and Thursdays because those are your important prep days for a race on the weekend. It is every single day. And so when it becomes a part of who you are and a way of life, you don't even second guess anything, right? The consistency is just part of who you are. And you know that if you drop the ball on one occasion, one day, that it's going to put you back in terms of time. But I think the education component, so the training IQ, but even understanding what it is for you to train and perform at your best. Like, what is your individualized recovery plan? And I get really frustrated because we give people individualized rehabilitation programs, right? Like, based on what they need to get back, especially in that return to performance space. But then we will give everyone does the same recovery. That does not make sense,
Right.
that we just blanket recovery and blanket, like, everyone foam rolls and does the same thing, and everyone's gonna contrast, or everyone's gonna use compression boots. We've really
Right.
got to start thinking about recovery like we would rehab, is like, this is tailored to you. This is individualized to your body, your biology, your mechanics, your nervous system. And I think the nervous system conversation is so huge, and we can go down a whole rabbit hole around
Yeah, we're
that.
gonna
And but people,
let's keep that in mind. We'll go down that rabbit hole. That's okay
but
because I'm a big nervous system guy, and I've had so many coaches tell me you can't. I mean, what do you mean train the nervous system? Well,
100%,
it's
it's
central to
huge.
everything you do. Yeah, it's
And if
central
you
to everything you do. Yeah.
100%.
Uh,
And then so, like, in terms of recovery as well, and even just prepping. And I had this conversation yesterday with someone, and they're like, "Oh, should I foam roll before I do my drill as a track and field athlete?"
and that's important too as we continue along that same line of questioning. Going back to something you said earlier, you have to individualize it because all athletes don't learn the same. They don't learn the
Yeah,
same physically. They don't learn the same from a cognitive perspective. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but we don't do it enough anyway.
yeah. And I have this conversation all the time with coaches, 'cause quite often I'm that consultant that comes in when there's a problem. They can't figure out why they're not moving a certain way, why they can't get back to performance, or why that injury isn't healing. And one of the first questions I ask the coach is like, okay, so how does the athlete learn? How do they like to receive and process information? And they'll stare at me blankly.
Oh yeah.
And for me, that's one of the most important things, right? Is like, how does this athlete learn? So some athletes, I need to put my hand on them. So if they're in the gym and they can't quite figure out a movement pattern, or they're not moving well as well as what I'd like, I might need to put my hand on them. Whereas another athlete, I can just give them a verbal cue. But each athlete is going to respond to different verbal cues as well. Other athletes need to see themselves in the mirror. Another athlete might need to watch a video of them doing it and then do it again. Or they might need a combination. But to get the best out of an athlete, we need to know that.
Yeah.
We need to know how they process information. We also need to know how much information they can take on. So the Noah Lyles of the world, Noah, you can give him that much information and he's just a super intelligent guy, right? So he can process it. Whereas the other athletes I've worked with, you can only give them one idea, one concept. And it's going to take them 24 hours to sit on it and think about it before they can come back and actually have a conversation about it. And that's okay, but you've got to know that about your athlete. So getting to know your athlete is the only way you're ever going to get anywhere close to their best performance.
And I tell you what, because of training age in that is critical. Understanding where they are, how much training they've done, because we've all encountered, what we call natural sports athletes. They're just good at that sport for some reason, but their training age is very low. So as you're starting to train them and you want to train them at a higher and higher level, you have to be real careful about giving them too much, like you said, because that might just overload them and take them down a road you don't want to go down, where performance starts to suffer a little bit. So
and that comes back to that nervous system thing, right? So like literally, the greater the training age, the better the nervous system is going to recover. So they're
I was trying to get
used
there.
to that. Where so that, and like I see this all the time, is so like an athlete might be able to handle the load, but because of their nervous system, they'll get overloaded and they might maintain it for, a long period of time. I've seen athletes, actually handle way beyond their capacity for maybe up to a 3 to 6 month period. Literally had a track and field athlete this week, like broke down after 6 months with a new coach. And the coach was like, oh, she's been handling the load. It's like, no. Her nervous system's been hanging on and now she's broken down. And there's always those nervous system signs when someone's about to break down. When you actually are really good at watching someone move and watching how they respond to training and over time, there's certain little things that you'll see an athlete starting to do or feel before they actually get. So if someone's the classic, shin splints, right? It's a classic one in a lot of our athletes in relation to overload. And I use shin splints because it's not the proper term, but people listening are going to know what shin splints is, right? But what you can normally see with someone with shin splints, they're going to start losing that foot stiffness that we see. They'll start not being so in a basketball, they'll start not being as reactive. They'll be a little bit slow. They'll be a little bit heavier, more contact time on the ground. And you might find they're just a little bit delayed, not turning as quick. Like we can see it starting to happen. And for me, I see that starting to happen. I'm like, hey, look, I can see you're turning a little bit less. Just have a look how your calves are feeling, with your ankle a bit stiff, all those types of things. And we can actually, if we're good at what we do, we can be able to catch things really early. But I think sometimes we rely on these, rudimentary old school measures of things rather than using our eyes and looking and understanding the whole athlete. And even when we talk to an athlete, the way that they talk to us and the energy that they bring and, how upbeat they're, all those kind of things. If an athlete's talking to you and they're like, oh yeah, training was all right, yeah, blah, blah, it's an indication that something's going on for them. They're not feeling at their best. So we can read all the signs and put it together, that picture that is an indication that they may be needing some input from that clinical side that we talked about to aid that performance side.
I had an athlete that and fortunately we caught it. He had just started training with me, but his load on plyos was something I was like, wow. But he was having Achilles tightness and calf tightness and stuff like that. And I kept telling his coach, I said, what are you guys doing? Well, they were doing these box jumps and these rebound jumps every day. I mean, every day. And this young man didn't have the strongest lower body anyway. But and so these rebound jumps and these box jumps and all these that kind of they were high impact, but the volume was just off the chart. But he says, I want to get him conditioned. I said, well, there's conditioning drills and running you can do without, jumping. I said, that's why you have all these guys out here right now with this same tail, tight calves, They call it, some of them said they were cramping, heels hurting, plantar fasciitis. It's all these things where boom, boom, boom. All they're doing is pounding the ground and rebounding. But he thought that was conditioning. So it took a couple of injuries and a couple of months of saying, Coach, hey, dial it back. Dial it back. You can do here's some other things you can do. But luckily it wasn't serious injuries that happened, but we were close to catastrophic.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said, and I say this quite a lot, quality, not quantity, right?
Right.
So if you are doing quality movement, if you're moving with the right intent and you're nailing the movements that you're doing, you can actually do less of it. Like, there's no point doing wasted reps. And so many coaches just think more is more, right? So an athlete doing plyo, for instance, if you're not activating and moving in the right way, and for instance, if you're doing single leg jumps and you're not actually activating your calf and you're not getting full calf height, you're wasting that rep.
Right.
Like, there's no point to it at that point, right? So just, I think if you can get quality and teach the quality movement and the athlete understands what they need to feel and the intent of the movement, then you can do less and get more out of it. And so many of, I think, my opinion is we get so many load related injuries because people aren't doing quality reps. They're just doing reps for the sake of doing reps. And in certain parts of the world, that is worse. Like, definitely, I spent a lot of time in Jamaica, and I have this less is more conversation all the time in Jamaica because I think I think globally, to be honest, there's this idea that if we just do more, we're going to be better.
Yes, that is a thing out there. More for the sake of doing more because we're going to get this work in. Well,
yeah, but for what purpose?
Yeah, no purpose.
For what purpose are you doing the work? And I literally ask it, I literally sit there, for what purpose? For what purpose? So many coaches that I consult with, and if they can't answer, there isn't a purpose. Like, they actually haven't figured out.
Yeah.
But you talk to a Lance Broman or something like that, who's probably one of the coaches, globally that I really do respect in that track and field space, and you ask him for what purpose, and he'll explain blah, 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 blah. This point in the season, I want them to feel this because of this, because of that. But not all coaches have that level of understanding. And I think there's an education, a big, huge gap. And crazily, that mush that you said in the middle, but then we're talking about the clinical performance continuum between performance and clinical, that mush in the middle is the space that isn't negotiated well by a lot of people.
Right.
And I think what happens is, like, is it the coach? Is it the physio? Is it the biomechanist? And for me, because I wear all those hats, I kind of traverse along that, and I'm like, I'm not good, but not everyone has that skill set to be able to traverse that. And then I think that understanding of when does a coach need to reach out to a biomechanist or a physio or a sports scientist, and how does that all work out, is a whole nother issue currently that is impacting, I think, the performance of athletes. And like, when I worked with Noah, it was really interesting because before we started, he said, what I know about me is I'm capable, but I haven't been healthy consistently. I believe if I can be healthy, I can be the fastest man on the planet. I need you to help keep me healthy. And then he went on to, like, pretty much not be unbeatable, but, do what he did at Worlds in 23 and then in 24 in Paris. So, and I think people underestimate that power of just being healthy, and what healthy enables you to do is be consistent.
Right.
Which is ultimately, you look at, and it's whether it's in basketball, track and field, football, whatever, the best athletes and those legends of sport are the ones that have been healthy enough
available,
consistently show up and compete. Yeah.
And
it's whether you're an NBA, NFL,
doesn't
track
matter,
and field, tennis, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And and then we see in tennis people like Federer and Nadal, and, like, as they got older, so they were legends, right? They dominated tennis. Anyone, you don't need to like tennis, know tennis. Everyone's heard of Federer and Nadal. Whether you're,
you already know.
You just know they're legends in the sport. But they had teams of people that kept them healthy enough to keep competing to relatively older age. But then they just got to a point that they couldn't stay healthy. And that was when their consistency dropped off because they couldn't stay
Right.
healthy and then end up retiring, right? The same thing happens in basketball. We have the same thing, some of those elite guys, and then I don't want to name too many names because of closeness, but certain people that are struggling to maintain performance in the league right now that are
They're
that
yeah,
and it's and these injuries that are just getting to the point that they're struggling to maintain, so the consistency in training and things like that isn't there. And so as soon as that consistency goes, it's a struggle to maintain anything. Load, injury management, mental capacity,
right. It's
and drive as well. Start leaving your drive when your passion. And you need those, like drive and passion is so key to any performance, and when you're injured or not.
recognizing for a lot of older athletes or athletes long into their careers, recognizing when you need to change how you're training is another thing that I run into a lot. I'll get calls from guys, I'll get calls from professionals training guys saying, we've been doing the same thing for, the last 10 years that he's been in the league. It's always worked. I can't understand X. I said, well, have you tried changing it? Have you tried maybe less time in the gym or less time running on the field or less time running on the court, and maybe go back to do some of that recovery stuff, some of that maintenance work you need to do so that the athlete can be available and still feel like he's, in that spot where he can produce at a high level. I said, what you're doing is you're killing him on the court in practice.
100%. 100%. And I think, what we're talking about before is, the individualization and how important that is, but that changes as we age. That isn't the same. Like every week that can change. And that's why we've got to monitor our athletes. We've got to talk to our athletes. We've got to, test our athletes. So we know what to maintain. We know what to modulate and, maneuver in order for them to keep performing at their best. Like high performance isn't static.
No.
The level changes, and what you need to do to maintain the level that you're required to get to is a constant change. So true high performers are so comfortable with change. It's just like, okay, if that's what we need to do, let's change it up. Let's change it up, and are open to that change. But in order to change, you need to be vulnerable. And a lot of people don't, they get stuck in their ways and they don't want to be vulnerable. So they either get caught in that like tunnel vision scenario where things need to happen a certain way, or they get caught in that place where they're just trying to stick with what they know.
Yes.
And
yes. This is the way
stimulus that
this is the way I've always done it.
But the stimulus isn't appropriate to them anymore. So you always need to be adapting to your stimulus, right? But if the stimulus isn't appropriate anymore, you need to be real with that. Like if you're, in the last years of your career, say in the NBA, and you've been playing for 15 years or whatever it is, there's no way that your load and how you're training your body at, say, 35 is going to be the same as what you're doing when you're 21.
Yeah,
there's no
it's
way.
completely different.
But it also would have changed over the time if you were actually checking in with yourself and, looking at your numbers and going, okay, what is best performance for me? And, I've got a guy right now who I'm just getting back into the league back here in Australia. He's been in the Boomers, the Australian team, etc. And, I've said to him, look, you're not going to play the same basketball you did when you were last playing because it's coming back, right? And I'm like, look, it's going to be different now. You're going to play a different role. You're going to be more of the head guy, the planning guy. The coach is going to use you differently. So you need to be ready to actually play a different game because you're at a completely different phase in your career and your strengths are different.
Right.
And I think that's the other thing, right? Is playing to your strengths, but also owning your weaknesses. And I think that's something that isn't done well generally in sport is like, okay.
Oh yeah. You don't want to show that weakness. You don't even want to look at it yourself.
No, but what's in the way is the way, people. Like, this is it. Like, literally the shit that, excuse me, I might.
No, you're all right.
Fair, but
Keep
the stuff that's like in the way, the things that like, my feet are stuffed. Like, you get that in basketball, right? My feet are toast. I was like, yeah, but you can strengthen them. You can do mobility exercises. You can improve that.
Yeah.
And if you actually stare straight at it, walk straight at it. So the best athletes that I've worked with in the world are the people like, there's a problem, there's an issue, and they're like, let's run straight towards it. And we go straight towards it and we find a way to get over that hurdle, whatever it is, but we're going to go straight over the top of it. There's no point putting your head in your sand or turning away because it's still going to be there. And it's still going to hold you back when it comes to execute at the highest level. And if you go to execute your best performance at the highest level under pressure and you know that there's some stuff in the background that you haven't dealt with, it's going to affect your performance. And I wrote a whole book on that. So,
Oh yeah, where's the book?
good question. So, see your elephant.
Okay, all right.
Discover what's holding you back from your true potential.
Okay, so
So, basically, the whole idea is it's not just an elephant in the room. We all have elephants and they show up in high performance moments. So our elephant is the thing that stands between us and our best performance. Our elephant is like our blind spot. It's our BS. It's the stuff we don't want to deal with. But in my experience is when people can actually deal with all their BS, whether it is a strength, weakness, a recovery issue, a fight with a girlfriend, and not on speaking terms with the agent, not enough stimulus, tunnel vision, burnout, whatever it is, fear, whatever it is, when they run straight towards it is when they can execute their best performance.
how often do you deal with fear on the way back from injury?
Every day,
Yeah, yeah.
every day, every day.
Most athletes won't admit that, but
And
and yeah,
fear affects everything. It affects the way you think. It affects the way you move. It affects the way you communicate. It affects the way you hold yourself. It affects your presence. It affects everything. And people underestimate the power of all those things. So if you're playing in a team sport, whether it's basketball, NFL, whatever it is, and you're coming back from injury and you're fearful and you're moving and looking like you're not ready, your team's going to be like, man, he's not here yet.
yeah.
We don't want to interact. We're not going to give him ball.
Well, what I find that with a lot of athletes, that fear is always wrapped in their ability. They're thinking that their ability to get back faster than the last guy did, or the same time another guy did. X had an ACL injury and he came back in 6 weeks. Well, how serious was his injury? Yeah, he may have had an ACL injury. Well, he had an ACL tear. They had to do surgery. Well, what kind of tear? What kind of surgery? It's all different, and they don't get those differences. If an injury, say, I've seen an athlete injure his Achilles tendon. It was a
Mhm.
tear, but it wasn't what I won't say it wasn't serious because it was serious to him, and we treated it that way. But he didn't have to reconstruct that tendon. They didn't have to go in and put it back together. So it was a little different. He had some micro tears in it. Painful? Yeah. Could he run on it? No. He came back pretty fast though because of the seriousness, or I hate to say this, but lack of seriousness, or the grade level of that injury, opposed to popped an Achilles tendon. Um, Here we go. We're going to be here for a year trying to get back to where we were. So the next guy comes up and he says, well, Johnny tore his Achilles and he came back last year. Well, he didn't go through what you went through. It's all different. And Johnny is, 22 and you're 29.
Yeah, all these things make a difference.
So.
And the training age and the training IQ and all of that. And what's their overall stress patterns, what their overall coping mechanisms are, all those things impact how someone will come back from injury. And I've had examples where I had an NBA player did a hamstring injury, quite a significant hamstring injury, right before the start of the season. I was already there working with him on performance stuff. So when he got injured in a match playing for his country, it was pretty easy because I was on site. And we literally started the rehab from his injury within half an hour of it happening. But it started with a complete reset of mindset. What do you need to think? So we had like a mantra, we had keywords that were going to like dictate and drive our rehab process. We were doing physical stuff. He was mentally meditating on it. He was doing exercises within 24 hours. And we had this guy back running in 5 days, and the NBA team, wanted us back there within 10 days. And so we turned up after in a significant injury that on paper, looking at the MRI, would have been probably 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
We got back to the NBA at 10 days, and they wouldn't let me go to the assessment or anything. They just wanted me to stay outside, whatever. And they called me and they said, like, you've sent through the MRI, but we don't believe it's true. And I was like, well, it's the MRI is the MRI. I've like sent it to you guys, like you've got it there. And then they're like, but he's good. Like he can run, he can cut, he can jump. And I was like, well, we've been in intense rehab. We've been in 24/7 rehab for 10 days. Like he wasn't perfect, but they didn't believe what we were able to achieve in 10 days, right? Like they were just saying, look, the MRI can't be the MRI. So, but this athlete was so intent at getting back to the start of the season. So I think you can't underestimate the mental side of the rehab process. And it's a whole body experience. It's not just rehabbing that hamstring.
Right.
It was the whole human. It was, he was working on his foot, he was working on his glutes, he was working on his core. We had him like within the first day, he was doing like his hamstring bridges, but he still had his hand on the basketball. Do not remove an athlete from their environment as much as you can. So I try and keep my athletes. If you're a swimmer, I try and get you at the pool doing something. Right. If you've got a shoulder injury or whatever. If you're a basketballer, you're going to be dribbling the ball, you're going to be bouncing the ball, whatever it is, you're going to be throwing the ball against the wall, whatever it is you can do to keep you in contact with the thing, keeping that neural drive, keeping the nervous system in that zone. So then you save that time, and that's that whole keeping on the clinical performance continuum, right? Most people, when this guy got injured and pretty significant hamstring injury, would have gone into clinical mode.
Yep, they would have isolated him, put him in a room by himself or off way over on the other side of the arena.
And then just talked all about how bad the hamstring is, all about how long it's going to take back, all about the tissue healing. Look, the tissue healing is going to happen in a certain time frame. But there's all this other stuff that we can do to support the tissue healing, support the human, keep their conditioning, keep the whole body. When someone does a hamstring injury, we can do so much for the glutes and the calf and the foot and even the quads and not do anything to the hamstring injury, but we're going to have them functioning back, running and doing all those things and confident. So consistency and confidence.
Yeah, but the way you're approaching it is with balance. Because
100%.
Because with
whole human.
Yeah, with when we get an injury, everything gets out of balance. And the whole focus is on the injury. And if we never bring the athlete physically and mentally and emotionally back into balance, if we don't attempt that, then we're just isolated on the injury. And when they start to come back and try to regain that balance, it's a whole nother workload at that point. Why not maintain what you have?
100%. 100%. And I think there's a huge thing around an athlete. Their identity is so much around them performing as an athlete, right? But they're human first and athlete second. And we get really clear. And when we know our athlete, that process is so much easier, right? Because we know how they learn. We know their triggers. We know how they thrive. We know what they need to hear. We know their tendencies. Are they going to get sad? Are they going to get angry? Are they going to get frustrated? Are they going to want to punch the wall? Like, what is it for their athlete? And nurture that and support that, their natural ways of being, but then guiding them in the direction which is still going back towards their best performance. Like, I never lose sight of best performance in all my rehab processes. So we're always talking about best performance when we get you back, what it is, obviously with realistic expectations. But I think sometimes we can get a little bit too focused on that one part of their body that they've injured.
Let's transition just a little bit into working with other professionals. You like me throughout my career, I kind of touched in a lot of places. physio, uh, foundations in strength conditioning, my foundations in the weight room, but on the track, um, just a lot of areas of performance. Working with other professionals, other physios, nutritionists, psychologists, doctors. Talk to us a little bit about why that's important, one, but how you go about that with the eclectic background that you have.
Yeah, like I think super important, like performance is always, it takes a village.
Right.
Always takes a village.
Right.
No one person can deliver everything. What because I've got a varied skill set, quite often what happens is I end up being this glue to a certain extent
Right.
because I can kind of get because I've got different skill set, I can get that bird's eye view of performance and kind of look down and kind of see the gaps and see where we might need to tweak or, we might need to go more towards nutrition or more towards psychology or whatever it is. And I quite often am that central person that kind of guides all those connections with other people. I know that I'm really good at a lot of things, but I'm not an expert in everything. So I want my athlete always to have the best. So I will seek out the best nutritionist or the best sports psychologist or the best biomechanics or whatever to support what I do. And I will be very open with them. It's like, look, I know a little bit about nutrition, but it's not my go-to. I really want you to see this person. I have a network of people globally that I tend to try and engage. And if I'm in the US and I'm not really sure who would be a really good, dietitian or nutritionist for a NFL player, I do have other people that would know, so it's always about seeking out those things. And I am very much or my values are very much excellence and connection and learning. So always driven by excellence, find people that have the same level of excellence as me. So if someone is okay with mediocre, they're not the kind of person I want to work with, and I don't want my athletes to work with someone
No.
that's okay with mediocre. So that's like a number one for me. Two, this is my personal thing. I need to feel like I can connect and trust that person.
Right.
Trust is very important to me, and I need to have respect. So we need to have respect both ways. So if I'm going to work with another professional, I need to respect who they are, what they've achieved, and they need to prove to me that that's who they are as a professional. I can't work with someone that I don't respect, and it sounds awful for some people, but I can't have trust if I don't have respect.
No, trust is critical, and building trust, doesn't happen overnight. Just because some guy has a reputation, and I try to get this across with some people I worked with in my past. Just because everybody goes to this guy and he has a reputation doesn't necessarily mean he's right. Because out of 100 people, I'm watching 75 athletes come away injured.
And I've had
Go ahead.
And I think it comes down to that individuality, right? That we're talking about before. And so even like working with professionals or working with athletes, if we don't gel, if we don't have a good connection, a good vibe, it's not going to work. Like I'm not your person. So I might be really great at what I do, but I might not be the best person for you.
Right.
And same with other health professionals, right? It's finding the best fit. And, certain people like I meet and I'm just like, yeah, we can totally work together. This is going to we're on fire, straight away. And other people, it's like, you're fighting and it's not that they're not, and when I say fighting, not physically fighting or arguing, it's more like you're trying fighting for
I'm
this
pretty sure
connection.
you jump in there.
Yeah, but that connection's just not there. And I think connection is really important. So you've got to have like that respect, trust, and then you can have connection. And then the athlete needs to feel like you present as a whole team. And I've seen in many cases this,
Tension.
almost like tension and disconnection between the people that are, advising an athlete, and the athlete needs to trust that you're all on the same page. And if you can't present and deliver to the athlete that you're on the same page, it's not going to be the best for the athlete. So there's other situations where I don't get to choose who I work with, and athletes already got people on board, and that's fine. And I just fit in, know my boundaries, know my space, and respect and honor them for what they're great at, and work within the bounds of what I do best. So But it can be a tricky space for sure.
Yeah, I've always said I only work with other spokes on the wheel because the athlete is the
Yeah.
hub. So the
Nice.
athlete
I like
is
that.
the hub of that thing. So you have to realize that you're a spoke. Now, there might be one person, depending on the age of the athlete, could be the agent, could be the parent, it could be whatever, but there's always at least one person that's the band on the wheel that holds the wheel together. There's always that. What could be somebody within that professional group doing that. Like you said, sometimes you're up here at the bird's eye view and you're getting that. But when you go in to work with an athlete, I want to know who all the other spokes are. Can we
Yeah, for sure.
can we keep our spot on the hub and not interfere, not come loose and get all tangled up with everybody else? Stay in your lane, stay right there so that we remain solid. I can respect everyone's professional input. Often for me, I like to learn people's personal approach, but I don't have to know that. If I don't have to know what they believe personally, but if their input is successful with the athlete and they work well with all the other spokes, I'm fine. But usually when that happens and everything is the wheels rolling and everybody's working together, usually there's some personal approach that's pretty similar. So it's not very often that a spoke will come off the wheel, because it was good. It was different. Now it's usually because it was broken some kind of way.
Yeah, totally. 100%. And I think my experience is quite often the athletes will know what they want, like,
Oh
straight
yeah.
off the bat. So if the athlete's getting to choose who they work with, they're like, you're in or you're out.
Yeah.
And, and the top level athletes, the higher you go up the chain,
Yeah.
they definitely know if you're a high performer or not. Like, they can't be around people that aren't high performers. So if you're not a high performer, they don't want you on your
Right.
team. So you've got to, show up and stand out. You know what I mean? You've got to do what you do. You can't just doubt yourself because an athlete is going to not want to be around
Well,
you.
they're gonna know right off the bat, or pretty
100%.
or pretty soon. Uh, uh, Athletes at all levels, but especially the elite levels, are really intuitive. They meet you the first time, and they got a feeling for what you do. And for what you do and what your approach is. And there's been some athletes that I would have loved to work with, but we didn't think the same. Didn't fit. And some of them have told me, coach, I don't think that's the way I want to go about it. I'm like, okay, cool. Here's some guys you need to talk to. I'm always great with, hey, here's some people you need to talk to. Maybe one of them will fit better.
Yeah.
And then I've told some
And
athletes, might not want to work with me. I don't think we'd fit together. You like this style. I'm this style. So.
I often find, so there's kind of all these lots of different categories in athletes, but there's some athletes that are really want that passive approach, right? So they just want to lie on a table. They just want to get rubbed.
Yeah.
They just want to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They want everything done for them. They don't want to
tell me what I have to do or do
it.
it. Yeah.
Just rub me, just put me in the hot tub, just do whatever it is. Whereas these other athletes, like, how do I be the best? How do I learn? What do we, and they're the people that I want to work with, because those are the people that we can edge those 1%ers out of, and we can actually live their best performance. But from that passive approach, you're never going to get 100% out of an athlete. Like, high performance is not passive
at all. So I seen this. I picked up this kid, the young kid. And I seen him on this super big hill, and he was trying to run up this. He was running the hill. So I drove past him. I stopped. I turned around. I came back, and I watched him attempt that run up that hill again. The hill was beating him up. The hill was working him. He wasn't working the hill. So I pulled up to him and I said, we went through the, hey, what's your name? And I wanted to let him know I wasn't a creepy guy and that I lived in the neighborhood. I said, if you're serious about what you're doing, come talk to me. This kid 2 years later now, completely different. That same hill, if he runs it, it looks like he's working the hill. If does that make sense? It's
yeah, I understand.
he is not passive at all. He just didn't know. Really low training age, really low training IQ. He was getting everything out of off the internet or whatever the case may be. But he wanted to go to the collegiate level, or he wants to go to the collegiate level. Looks like he's going to have an opportunity to do that.
Amazing.
So, but that's how I kind of choose athletes. I kind of watch them. And like you said, if they just want to lay on the table and get rubbed, I really can't do it. I got to see, a little bit more than that. I had one.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I had one athlete say,
no, you're good.
Coach, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then, we'll get the workout over. I'm like, okay, that's not going to work.
Yeah. No.
So, but anyway.
I love working with athletes who want to learn and are curious as to what their best performance is. Like, how far can I go? How fast can I go?
Yeah.
How high can I jump? Can I make the NBA? Like, can I be best point scorer? Can I do this? Can I do that? Like, question how good I can be. And, so many people, and I don't get this, like, so many people go through life and don't even question, like, what is the best version of me? Like, how far can I go? Like, I love that as a question. Like, how far can you go? It's like, how can you make it to the NBA? Can you make it to the Lakers if you want to be in the Lakers? Whatever it is, like, question what it is that
are you
makes you be
willing
great
to give the effort?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing with me. I don't care what they know. I don't care how much they lift, how fast they run, any of that stuff. Because we can get better at all of that if you have just a smidgen of physical ability. We can get better at all that.
Yeah.
However,
you got to be willing to show up.
Are you willing?
Yeah. And I feel like some people think they are, but they're willing on Tuesdays and Thursdays because that fits into their schedule.
Yeah.
But like I said before, high performance is a way of life. So it's every day. So it's being willing to give it all you got and some more. And to me, that's what high performance is. It's like, it's going to take everything.
There's
and that little bit that you're hiding in reserve.
Yes. That little bit where you say, I want to be able to stay up and do X, or I want to be able to go out with my buddies tonight and do X. Well, I'm asking you, what do you want more? That one evening of, video game time, or to go to the NBA or go play college at the NCAA level, or do you want to be an all-pro, or do you just want to make the team?
And I think, like we talked about fear before, and I think fear is one of those things that stops people from going all in and leads people into that more passive role because they're, actually scared of going all in and, what will happen, what if I fail, all those kind of things. But I say to athletes all the time, fear is a test of how much you want it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it really is. Yeah. I had to let that one sink in. Fear is a test of how much you want it. Okay. All right. I like that. I'm going to use it.
So it's like that whole thing, right? It's like if you're scared to go all in or you're being a little bit passive or whatever, it's like, well, how much, if you really want it, you're going to go all in.
Yeah. There's not going to be a question whether you will or not, and you won't have to ask yourself more than once. All right. Hey, look, let's.
That takes a bit to drop in, I know.
Yeah, it's that's one of those things you sit back, you sip on your tea, you go, huh? And that's life though.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
do you want to be the best physio or best performance consultant you can be, or do you just want the label? You follow?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you just want the
Oh,
label,
totally.
if you just want the label, you finish school and you're kind of, hey, I'm a consultant.
But it comes down to that high performance is way of life, right? Like I do this is my Sunday morning. Like I do I'm passionate about this. I want to change the world. I want to help people be their best version of themselves. You know, it's you don't get to switch that off. It's who I am.
Right.
And I think that's the difference between being good and being great. To be great, it has to be who you are and it has to be 24/7. You can be good and show up and
Yeah,
do a
and
good
and and
job.
get accolades and attaboys and attagirls and get all that stuff,
But
but you
to
get
be the person that, you know, gets hunted down by people all over the world or to be, you know, to be the fastest person on the planet or to be the number one scorer in the NBA, you need to be hunting that down. That just doesn't high performance just doesn't show up on your doorstep because
I
you did one good thing. Or you did something cool for you did rehab for 2 weeks and now high performance is gonna show
yeah,
up, you
exactly.
know.
Hey, you know what? I call that being a middle of the pack runner. If you wanna run in the middle of the
Mhm.
pack, okay, that's fine. I mean, but, if you're giving 100% effort every time you run and that's where you are, I'm with you. I'm proud of you. But
Yeah.
but if you're running in the middle of the pack and you could be in the front and you're just, you know,
Why would you run in the middle?
yeah, why would you run in the middle? That's my question. We're all not runners, so to speak, but if you're going to go out there and do it, you might as well do it for some purpose. Let's
100%.
let's talk about you professionally and where do you think the profession as a whole is today? Where would you like to see it go? And where was it when you started?
Wow. Huge question. I'll start from when I started. So I've been doing this for 25 plus years. I think when I started, we had less science. Um, we were just beginning to understand performance because the science wasn't there.
Yeah.
Um, and we kind of had coach. So 25 years ago, there was kind of sports coaches and there was some strength and conditioning, and then there was physios in that clinical box.
Right.
And now it's evolved in the I think the science and sport being obviously so much more professional across so many sports
Mhm.
has meant now that we've got so many more different practitioners and people filling that space along that clinical performance continuum that we're talking about. So I really think it has almost flipped on its head. So before we had very siloed, we had the sports coaches and we had the clinical people on one end, and then there was a little bit of strength and conditioning in the middle. But even when I first started, the strength and conditioning coaches and the coaches hardly even communicated. Like it wasn't as much
Right.
of a shared interest and communication that it is now. And I think now with the science and with the professionalism, there's so much more opportunity to traverse that clinical performance
Yeah.
continuum that we're talking about. And I think it's a really exciting space. I'm obviously very passionate at what I do. The pieces of the puzzle that I think are underestimated that I'm working really hard to, be a global expert in is one in the movement analysis and understanding
Okay.
movement and how it impacts performance and injury.
Right.
And there's so many different tools that we have now that enable us to really get accurate information on these things to aid that return to performance and aid performance in itself. And then I think the other side of it is that mental side of it and understanding the whole human and the impact of language and the impact of how an athlete learns and all the elements of sports psychology and mindset that I think get not used and understood as well as they possibly could.
Okay.
So for me, I've gone and done sports psychology, one of the degrees I haven't finished, because I was like, you know what, it was just a really busy time and just didn't have the time to finish it. But I've gone and done the study side of it, at least. I just haven't done the clinical side.
Right.
But having that understanding and then having that coaching background then enables me to have the conversations and use the language and enable the athlete to learn and understand in a way that resonates with them.
Right.
When I have the capacity to do that and speak in that certain way, then all of a sudden there is a space where we can create processes that work for the athlete. I'm very big on process. So that process is all the way from how they warm up, how they activate their muscles, what they need to feel, how they train, what they think about in their gym, right the way through to that recovery.
Yeah.
And so many of the athletes that come to me, one of the biggest things I leave them with is understanding of their body, understanding of how their mind affects their body, and the process for them to perform at their best.
Yeah. And one of the things I always say is mind the process, then trust the process. Don't go back to what you were doing before, because obviously, it wasn't working, or it wasn't working as well as you wanted it to. So
100%. And I have athletes all around the world that I work with, and like we message back and forth and send videos and do video calls, all those kind of things, depending on where I am in the world, obviously. And literally I get these, SOS messages like, this is hurting, or I'm not feeling my glutes firing, or whatever. And like literally most of the time I'll just send back one word: process. Like they know the process, right?
Right.
They just haven't done their process
Right.
properly. And then they go, and I'm like, okay, what did you miss out? What did you miss out in the process? Because we know when you do the process, you feel good, right? And then, I didn't do this activation exercise, or I didn't stretch this, or whatever. They go back, do the process, and they're like,
or
I nailed it today. Best training ever, PB in training,
yeah, or my 20-minute my 20-minute warm up. I get this a lot. My 20-minute preparation or process that I do before practice or game day or whatever, I only did 10. I didn't think I needed as much because it was warm outside.
But you know what? The other side of this is so crazy. And I had this conversation with a basketballer just a couple of days ago. Someone who's earning a decent amount of money. He was like, because we're talking about process, and I'm happy him develop his own process for game day. And he's like, why do they just, when we're playing at this level and we're all getting paid all this money, but then they expect us all to like warm up like the same, right? And he's like, I feel so much better when I do what you said. Why don't we all do that? I was like, I don't know. Like it's actually bizarre,
Well, that's rooted in sport coaching way back. Have the team come out and do it together, because one of the things is it looks good. Everybody's doing the same thing. It's regimented. It's all this.
True.
So that's where that's rooted. I think there's a time for that, for bringing the team together at the end. I like the way the NFL does it nowadays, because they'll come out, they'll get to the field a couple hours ahead of time. All the players will be out for both teams going through their process. They'll go back out, they'll come back out, 20 minutes before the game, and the team will go through a process. But they're already warm. So when they get to
and they're already feeling good,
and they're already feeling good,
and then they go to the team. So that's like perfect to me.
That's so I like the way that. But it used to be different. It used to be, we're not going out and warming up until everybody goes out. And you stand there and you do some jumping jacks, and you do this, and you do that. Now, I was pretty fortunate when I was a young athlete that we had coaches that, hey, if you're going to warm up individually before the game, there's your space, there's your time. So was it exactly like it is today? No, but it was much further ahead than 80s and 90s. But listen here, Dr. Brown, how do we find you if we need you?
Okay, so easiest way is probably my website. So www.performance- the-state.com. And you can send me an email or a interest link there. Otherwise, on Instagram, Performance State Dr. Joe is the hashtag DRJO.
Okay, so I'm going to probably be in your Instagrams in the future, and we're gonna definitely ask you back if you have time. Don't big time me now.
Sure.
Don't big time me.
No man, I'm good.
Okay. All right.
These conversations are important to have, and I'm all about helping people be the best version of themselves, whoever they are. And I feel like the education space, like we've talked a lot of concepts and
Right.
I think a lot of things and philosophies that a lot of young coaches will get a lot out of. So I love helping people.
And this is why I love having guests on like you, because one of the things that I wanted to do with this podcast almost 9 years ago when I started it was have a space where we could have a conversation and somebody could listen to that conversation and say, yeah, well, I didn't know that. And they're professionals. So, hey, well,
100%. I think
go ahead.
There's so many things as well that you're not going to find this kind of this information. You're not going to find it in a book. You're not going to be able to get it on ChatGPT. Like, you're not going to be able to Google it and get this information. This is lived experience. This is not stuff you get from a randomized controlled trial. This is stuff that only experience can give you. And I think we are in a space and a time where there's a tendency for everyone to look to AI to, find information or
can't get no AI here. Can't,
whatever.
Can't get this mug on AI.
You can't get this conversation. You can't get this information from any other place apart from people that have lived it and experienced it. And there's certain things we're never going to have science to back up because we just can't legally do the scientific tests and experiences and the experiments because it's just not moral and ethical, but experience will tell us a certain thing. And that's why these conversations are so important.
Well, I hate to say it, but we're at the end of the show, Dr. Joe.
Oh, so sad.
But I want you to know that we will invite you again, so please come back. Thank you very much for your time.
For sure.
Thank you for the conversation, and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's been Performance Talk. My name is Yul Gordon. Our guest today has been Dr. Joe Brown, and we're out.